Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Road to Pediatrics panel. We're going to get started in just a second. We're just going to wait a couple of minutes to let everybody get into the session.
Today, everything is about to change in the brain and fluid.
Serves our Spanish population. We love our patients, and we are door-to-door bilingual, from our access reps to our care assistants to our nurses to our providers. Our attendings are all bilingual, and we
Recording in progress.
Should we wait a couple more minutes?
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Road to Pediatrics panel, hosted by SMA and LMSA. We have 6 wonderful people on our panels today. I'm going to introduce myself first, and my co-host will do the same. I am Dr. Oriaku Caso-Soka. I'm currently an associate professor at the Kirk School of Medicine at UNLV. I've been here since 2015, and I'm currently serving as the program director for the Pediatrics Residency program. And I will turn it over to Chineze.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chineze, also Chi. I am a third-year pediatrics resident at Cincinnati Children's.
Wonderful. So we are going to introduce our 6 panelists today. And after we introduce our panelists, we'll go ahead and let you guys know how the session will run, and then before we start asking questions. So first off, we have Dr. Jessica Fowler. She's an assistant professor of clinical anesthesiology and critical care medicine at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine, and an attending physician in the pediatric critical care at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Virginia, her medical doctorate from Duke University, and while in medical school, her MPH from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She serves as the Associate Program Director for the Pediatric Critical Care Fellowship Program and on the executive leadership team as a co-faculty lead for Alliance of Minority Physicians, an organization focused on the support of trainees for UIM backgrounds at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and the University of Pennsylvania Health System. Her academic focus includes QI implementation work in pediatric post-cardiac arrest care, as well as efforts in increasing workforce diversity. She is the newly named Associate DIO of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for CHOP Graduate Medical Education and directs the Penn Visiting Clerkship Program for UIM students as part of her efforts to increase the diversity pipeline of physicians in medicine. Dr. Fowler currently serves on the board of SNMA as one of the professional board members. Let's welcome Dr. Jessica Fowler.
Okay. Our next panelist is Dr. Tamara Johnson. So Dr. Johnson attended Duke University, where she received her BA in psychology and double minored in dance and women's studies. She then moved to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to attend University of Pennsylvania's Special Science Postbac program. While there, she also worked as a research coordinator for the University of Pennsylvania Center of Autism. Dr. Johnson went on to receive a medical degree from Medical University of South Carolina and completed her residency and chief residency at Greenville Health System. Afterwards, she completed the primary care training and enhancement fellowship through a collaborative effort with Health Resources and Services Administration and Edward Via College of Medicine, Carolina's campus, which ignited her interest in social determinants of health. Dr. Johnson is a practicing pediatrician at a federally qualified health center in Spartanburg, South Carolina. She also holds dual academic appointments as an adjunct assistant professor at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine, Greenville, and clinical faculty at VCOM Carolina's campus. Her interests include community health and outreach, especially underserved populations, and mentoring minority students. In addition to serving her community, Dr. Johnson is also a professional dancer with the Von Neumann Dance Company.
Great. Our next panelist is Robert Trevino. Dr. Robert Trevino is a chief resident at the University of Illinois College of Medicine, Peoria. He completed his MD PhD training at Rush Medical College in Chicago before completing a pediatric residency at the Medical College of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. During medical school, he served on national leadership with both SNMA and LMSA, specifically around pathway programming and mentorship. He is also a researcher and mentor with the Tour for Diversity in Medicine. He is currently applying for pediatric emergency medicine fellowships with a career interest in academic medicine and passion for medical education and stimulation, community advocacy and health disparities, and continue to diversify the face of medicine through mentorship and career development.
Our next panelist is Indidi Yanaka. Dr. Yanaka is an associate professor in the Division of Hospital Medicine at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Oregon in 2003 and graduated from University of Michigan Medical School in 2007. She completed pediatric residency and chief residency at Cincinnati Children's Hospital Medical Center. In addition to her clinical role as a pediatric hospitalist, Dr. Yanaka has served as the Associate Program Director of the Cincinnati Children's Pediatric Residency Program since 2011. Dr. Yanaka has formal training in quality improvement and obtained her master's in medical education from the University of Cincinnati in 2015. Furthermore, Dr. Yanaka also spends time working on institution-level community health initiatives, which reflects her passion for diversity, inclusion, and health equity. As a member of the Cincinnati Children's Health Equity Network operations team, she helps support equity-oriented improvement work of HEN teams across the institution. Dr. Yanaka is also the medical director of quality improvement for HealthFind, a network of pediatric care providers and organizations backed by Cincinnati Children's that connect to help children be healthier, more effectively, and affordably.
Our next panelist is Joanna Vidal Vellan. Dr. Vidal Vellan is a native of San Juan, Puerto Rico, is a senior medical director in quality and pediatrics at UPMC Insurance Division and clinical assistant professor of pediatrics at UPMC Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. Dr. Vidal Vellan graduated with a bachelor's degree in biology from Wellesley College and completed her Doctor of Medicine from UMD-NJ Robert Wood Johnson Medical School in New Jersey. She completed her general pediatrics internship and residency at the University of Washington Seattle Children's Hospital and received her healthcare focused master's in business administration from George Washington University. She has over 20 years of experience in clinical practice and has been a thought leader in the field of value-based care, population health, care management, and social determinants of health.
And last but not least, our final panelist is Dr. Tyree Winters. Dr. Tyree Winters is the program director for the pediatric residency program at Gwendolyn Children's Hospital and medical director of the Overlook Medical Center of Pediatric Health Start Clinic. Dr. Winters received his BA from the University of Michigan Dearborn and his DO from the Ohio University Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine. He completed his postgraduate training at Nationwide Children's Hospital, Columbus, Ohio. In addition to his duties at Atlantic Health System, he is a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics at Sidney Kimmel College of Medicine at Thomas Jefferson University, and a clinical associate professor in the Department of Pediatrics at St. George's University School of Medicine in Grenada. Finally, he is a current president of the National Osteopathic Medical Association and is also on the board of trustees of the American College of Osteopathic Pediatricians. Dr. Winters is committed to community pediatrics and child advocacy and maintains a special interest in helping youth combat obesity. To that end, he created a dance exercise program for kids and adopted the moniker Dr. Ty, Hip Hop Dance Doc.
All right, will you please welcome our panelists today? Thank you guys for coming and joining us. I'm gonna have Dr. Ebo go through what our session will be about, and we'll get started with all the questions.
All right, so this is a very informal session. This is for fourth-year medical students applying to pediatrics, and this essentially this panel is here to answer all of your questions about what the process will be like, what programs are offering, and essentially get all of your questions out there. We have a set of questions that we're going to be asking the panelists, and then after that, it will be an open Q&A session for you to ask whatever questions you have and have our panelists dive into those questions for you. So we will start with our first question.
Wonderful. And feel free to use the chat. We'll catch up on the questions and ask them at the end as well, if you don't feel like coming off mute to ask them yourself. So to start, why did you guys choose or pursue pediatrics?
I'm happy to start. You know, it's interesting. I initially thought I wanted to be a teacher for quite some time. I knew I loved kids. I'm the oldest of 5 siblings and always saw myself working with kids. But, you know, ended up being really drawn to medicine in general, just because I really enjoyed science. And when I went to med school, I really kept an open mind. Thought peds would be for me, but wanted to make sure I gave other specialties a chance. I think for me, what really sticks out about pediatrics is that you have the opportunity to impact the lives of children and adolescents really early. You have the opportunity to really connect with the family. Certainly you are treating children, but you're also really trying to connect with parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, all different types of caregivers. And I think to me, that was really gratifying. You know, I really loved the fact that kids, for the most part, get better. And, you know, that was very appealing. And then I would say my picture of what my career would be as a doctor was very narrow prior to starting residency. You know, I thought I would, you know, practice clinically, but didn't really understand that there was lots of opportunities to still teach. which is what I love. And there's so much flexibility and opportunity in medicine, and your career can be what you want it to be, whether you're practicing in the community, whether you're practicing at an academic center, whether you're working for industry. I think there's just so many opportunities. So I really liked the fact that, I could take a different course and really, reinvent myself and figure out how to have the largest impact on kids.
And I'll say I did actually get to be the chance to be a teacher. And so my part of my big story in terms of pediatrics really was being a middle school science teacher. And, when I was at the stage of being, in college and thinking about what I wanted to do with my career, I was really torn between education and medicine. Getting a chance to be in a classroom made me realize what I enjoyed about it, but I also understood the big challenges that we had faced in K through 12 environment. And what's funny is, as much as you've heard from, I think, all of our panelists in terms of our interest when it comes to health disparities and social determinants of health, those are the same things that we're seeing impacting the kids in the classroom. And I think for a lot of the, especially community pediatricians who are out there in the primary care world, they see these things on a regular basis. And so I think for people who have that community-minded piece, as well as that interest in what does this look like outside of just the medical home world, pediatrics is a great place to be, because you can start to bring in a lot of these different components in terms of who is the support around these children. And for as much as we all, love engaging with the kids in terms of, seeing what's going on, we also recognize the high need for being able to communicate effectively with their support network, whether it's that close-knit circle of family or friends, but even into the community and teachers.
I had some less deep reasons initially for choosing pediatrics, but these are all really inspiring answers. So I struggled with adults. If I had to probe to bone one more time, I was just not going to be able to do it. But honestly, so I think part of what happened is I found the population that made me excited to come to work. I initially in my fourth year, I was torn between OBGYN and peds, and it wasn't a follow the baby or the mom that didn't work for me, but I realized I wasn't a surgeon. I think I was drawn to the acuity, which is how I ended up in critical care. But I think, people say when you find your people, you find your purpose. And I think that once I decided it was the population that interested me, it was hard to find a pediatrician where I was at Duke, and I'd say in my training since then, where people didn't care about things like social determinants of health or caring for the whole patient and the whole family. And I couldn't separate what I was doing in medicine from what was happening to the patients outside the hospital. And I felt like in other specialties, they really did. And so I think that appealed to something deep in me, in addition to enjoying the patient population. I love having to get, on all fours to listen to a kid's heart. I don't mind parents, which I think was also a really big part of it. And then I think what I began to explore is there are just so many things that you can do within pediatrics, which I think makes it very unique and a great specialty.
I was one of those weird people that wanted to be a pediatrician ever since I was 5 years old. And that's exactly my trajectory. It was because of a Black woman that I wanted to be a pediatrician. My pediatrician was a Black woman, a phenomenal pediatrician back in Detroit, Michigan, by the name of Dr. Gwendolyn Gordon. And she was the reason that she was exactly what I thought I wanted to be when I grew up. And I always wanted that to be that example for someone else. And that was solely my whole reason. Even when I had the department chair of pediatrics at my medical school tell me, like, you sure you going on interviews where everybody's like, oh, emergency medicine is that way, or oh, ortho is that way, because those who don't know me, I'm 6'6". So quite tall, quite big. So when you see me as a pediatrician, and the first thing everybody always says is like, are the kids scared of you? And I'm like, no, actually they climb all over me, or they think that like they have no fear. And that was the beauty of peds for me. Plus it was that paternal instinct that I just wound up having. I mean, every time that I would be around kids, and it just seems like it's funny. I don't know if you all probably see this because we're all the same people in the sense of like, we're all children people, baby people. It seems like every time you go into like a restaurant or on the plane or anywhere, kids always follow you. They always look at you. They always are like not scared of you. And you're just like, oh my God, I just want to be away from kids for just 1 minute. It never fails. You're on sitting on a plane and a kid reaches over on you and try to climb over you. That, my friend, is how I knew I was a pediatrician. I was like, I can't run from my destiny.
Oh, that is such an amazing story. I would like to share that because there's so much commonality between our stories. And I grew up in Puerto Rico, and I was inspired to be a pediatrician also early on by my own pediatrician, just like you, Dr. Winters. His name is Dr. Humberto Vasquez. And what he did was he just really saw my passion for medicine since I was really early. And he put time in encouraging me, believe in me, and gave me this positive message. It's like, you're smart, you can do this, study hard, do well in science and math and all the other classes. And every time I would come back from my well child visits, every year he'll like, how was your grades? And so he wanted me to be successful. And that was such a wonderful influence in me. I also wanted to be a teacher. And so I was the one who did a lot of babysitting since I was young. So I watched a lot of kids when I was, in my teenager years, and I really love and relate very well with children. And just like that, kids will follow you wherever you are and love spending time with them. So when I was in medical school, just like Dr. Yanaka said, I really wanted to be open to all the specialties and have an open mind. But immediately I went to pieces, like that's it. This is who I want to be. And the rest is story. So.
All right. So yeah, mine was like Dr. Winters in a sense that I always knew I wanted to be a pediatrician. I did not have any desire to do anything else. I was that person. I was that kid that loved kids. I was the teenager that loved kids. I was the adult that loved kids. So I was that person in my family that was hanging around with all the little cousins when none of the older people wanted to be with them. So when I came into medical school, it was medical school's job to convince me to do otherwise because I was pretty much set. And like Dr. Fowler said, when you find your people, you find your people. And so when I got to my peds rotation, which I actually put later in the year, I was on call and I was just like, I can be on call here. I dreaded call with every other specialty. And I also realized that I have patience for young children. I do not have patience for adults. And, exactly. See, everybody's shaking their head. I'm like, if the kids cry, have a tantrum, whatever, I am very good. If I have an adult that's just trying to have an adult tantrum, patience is not there at all. And so I realized, I'm like, these are my people. I love them. I they're like my babies. So I get to be somebody's mama with every single visit. And I'm asking them, like, what's going on in school? What's going on? What do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, I give them homework. Because if they say, I don't know what I want to be, then the next visit is, I'm going to need you to go home and I'm going to need you to sit down and figure it out. And when you come back, I was like, you can have a PowerPoint presentation. You could have it on your phone. You could do whatever. You can draw it out. But I need you to tell me what you want to be. And so that is what I just absolutely, truly enjoy, because you can watch them grow up from literally newborn and, just watch them progress through all of the stages. And it's absolutely amazing. And so that's what gets me excited every single day to be with them. And so, like I said, I wish it was something earth shattering, but I always wanted to be one. And medical school just confirmed that that's what I wanted.
Awesome. Thank each of you guys for answering that question. As we move on, our panelists would love to be able to see everybody's face. If you guys are willing to turn on your camera and engage with them, they would love to see you. If not, we understand, but we would love to be able to participate with you guys visually. All right, we'll keep going.
All righty. So our next question is, what do you wish you knew about pediatrics before applying?
One of the things I wish that I knew about pediatrics was that it was going to be as inpatient focused as possible in our residency programs. Obviously, there are residency programs and there are tracks that you can go that are more primary care based or outpatient based, but the ACGME is the ACGME wherever you go, whatever program you go into, and there are certain requirements that need to be done. And those requirements a lot of time are inpatient. Now, I will tell you this, I could not be an effective outpatient physician without having a great understanding of inpatient medicine and of the acute care medicines, like critical care for both PICU and NICU. It's just impossible because I recognize sick and I know when a patient needs to be admitted or when I need to send a patient over. With that being said, every time I walk into the PICU, I always kind of get a twitch because I just dislike PICU so much. It hurts inside. Even though everybody always thought I did really well. I'm like, really? Because I just don't like it.
Dr. Winters, you're hurting me. You're hurting me. You're hurting me.
Dr. Fowler, I love you because you do what I refuse to do. And I'm sure I do what you refuse to probably do. So we work. And that's what I love about peds is that you can fit in wherever you want to, and there's a place for you. So that's what I wish I knew.
Out of the nail salon, and
oh, go ahead, Doc. Oh, we're good. Okay. As a community pediatrician, what I wish I knew when I was applying to residency is how much psych I would face in my clinic. And so if I could do it over again, I would do so many more electives in child psychiatry because I mean, I am seeing patients that I have not been trained to see, and I literally don't have anyone to send them to. And so I'm literally learning on the fly. So I really wish I knew that ahead of time.
I think that is a great call out for sure. I think that is something we've been thinking about just within our own residency, how we best prepare general pediatricians to take care of patients who have various mental health disorders. It is a huge issue, and access is a problem. I would say the other thing that I didn't realize is that I would be taking care of adults. I didn't know. I had no idea. So, in pediatrics, you care for patients. I'm a hospitalist, so I only see patients in the inpatient setting, and we take care of a lot of kids with various congenital diagnoses. And we see as that they get older, the transition to an adult provider is hard, especially if that adult provider is not as familiar with their congenital heart lesion, or if families, after working with a general pediatrician and pediatric subspecialists over several years, it's hard to transition. So we actually take care of a fair amount of adults. I do time on our complex care service, and we have a lot of young adults with significant neurologic impairment and technology dependence who we care for in our hospital. And I didn't know. It's been very interesting, that piece of pediatrics. But I think it's something that I did not really think about when I pursued residency in peds.
I think one of the challenges for me, and I kind of had an idea, is that, when you are in the office or you're in the hospital seeing kids, kids respond to you because I feel like they're just amazing beings. They go from the heart, and their innocence is just something so beautiful. So it doesn't matter if you have an accent, doesn't matter if you have different skin colors, doesn't matter if you're short, doesn't matter if you're tall, kids will look at you and respond to you. What I needed to learn quickly is how to work with the families and the caregivers that have stereotypes and had different challenges of what the pediatrician should look like. And that was hard. And though I know in the United States, I also belong to a community of color, really trying to advocate for children, teach parents about the importance of immunizations, things like that, treatment of behavioral health conditions. If the family has a stereotype and they just think of you as a pediatrician, you need to navigate that. And sometimes that is really hard. And I think you develop this tough skin and be like, okay, I'm going to try my best. But sometimes though, the family is not treating you well, you're going to see that. Families are going to yell. Families are not going to do anything you ask them to do. Families are going to be offended because you mentioned HPV immunization. The child is what's the most important. And you as a pediatrician, you advocate for that child. So sometimes you have to really forget about you as a person and your own heart and be like, I am here to defend, to protect, to advocate, to educate on behalf of this child that cannot do that and be strong. So I think that is something I learned during residency and practice that I wish I needed to know before I walked into my first year as an intern.
Does anybody else want to speak before we go on?
May I just say one thing? I also think the hardest thing that I had to learn was you are going to see some really horrible things that have been done to children, and that will almost make you question, like, why did you go into it? Regardless if that is intentional things that were done, unspeakable things that can be done to children, and unspeakable situations that happen. Sometimes, like Dr. Trevino knows, there are stories that I can't even share because I just automatically just start bawling, especially like the first time I lost a child, and had to see a mother losing her child and just be in that situation. That happened literally about 14 years ago. And to this day, just thinking about it still brings me to tears. That's how much it affected me. And I had to learn, thank God I had a mother who was a mental health counselor who taught me a lot about my own mental health and how I had to make sure that I took care of myself and took care of my mental health during that situation. But that was something that was really hard.
And I think something that goes along with this is, for as much as we, do see these hardships and these challenges and struggles that the kids face that are oftentimes not a result of anything that they did. It's the situations around them. The piece I think that I didn't fully appreciate until going through residency was the degree of resiliency in children. And you see these kids go through these things that leave us as adults with just questions for everything around them in terms of what that support looked like. And these kids continue to grow up and they have, different role models who are able to remain in their life and be a positive influence. And you hear these stories of down the road of what this looked like. And, from my past, it's been a while since I was a teacher, but there's a number of students who I still know what's going on with, and those things that you just, stick with you on that other side of it as well. And you hear your pediatricians talking about it when you go through rotations and you do electives. But I think to see it from kids that you've cared for, it really starts to solidify in your head what this means. And I think, going back to that first question of just why a lot of us do what we do, you recognize kind of the good that can come from all of this.
Thank you for that, you guys. We're going to transition just a little bit, talk a little bit about this journey of actually applying and trying to figure out how to set yourself apart. So in your guys' mind, what makes a strong applicant for pediatric residency, and how do these individuals on the call actually set themselves apart?
Dr. Winters and I were on a session last week, I think, about talking about defining your story and your narrative. I think first and foremost, owning what that story looks like. So you guys are in these stages where you're putting it all together on paper and what that application pieces are, from the personal statement to connecting to how you set up your SCV, to even potentially when you were talking to people who are writing your letters, in terms of what things you wanted them to highlight. And the next steps for you guys as those pieces get submitted is then saying, well, how do I take that written, all of that written stuff that puts the story down on paper and translate that into the actual interview and what I want to share, and finding a way to make sure that that story lines up and has that kind of that coherent piece of being able to show why you want to do pediatrics and what you've done to put yourself in that position as a strong applicant. I'll let the others kind of go into some of the other pieces that would like highlight this, but I think as a basic piece, just making sure that your story really comes together through all parts of your application.
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. I think what programs are looking for is someone who's well-rounded, right? I think we can all acknowledge that doing well academically is important. I think we can all acknowledge that, passing your STEP exams is important. All of those things are factors, but they don't tell the whole story, right? I personally want more from a pediatric resident. I certainly could, have residents who are very book smart, can pass a test, but I think you can gather from all of the panelists that, the knowledge that you gain as a pediatrician is something that is just a part of being in medicine. You have to be self-directed in your learning, but it's the skills that no one ever talks about that really defines who you are as a doctor and how you connect with people. So I want someone who's a strong communicator. I want someone who has shown commitment, longitudinal commitment to community engagement or research, or volunteering. I want someone who, when I read their letters of rec, I'm like, oh, I have a better sense of who this person is beyond, their grades or their STEP scores. I think we're just looking for real people, right? And I think in pediatrics, it's just so important because you have to develop rapport, you have to establish a therapeutic relationship, not just with kids, but with their families. And it takes a special person to do that. And so I think for those of you who are wondering, what are programs looking for? I've had this, blemish in my academic, resume, in my academic journey. It's totally fine. You might have had a blemish, but that doesn't define who you are. So I will emphasize the importance of being able to tell your story and what you learned from it and how that's going to make you a better doctor.
I think when you are applying for pediatrics, I really would love to see a story of why you're interested in kids besides academic work. And I know very well how challenging it is during medical school to do volunteer activities, but it's so important during your break. And it doesn't have to be like every single week, but to really show your commitment and understanding of where you are in the community and what kind of things you have done to make a difference, particularly, with children and mothers. There's so much need. There are so much social determinants of health that are impacting our members and our patients. So how can you demonstrate your interest and what kind of work you have done outside of the normal academic work that is, of course, expected, as Dr. Yanaka was just mentioning, that demonstrate that extra step and interest in family well-being. It could be as simple as mentoring students in middle school and participating in a STEM program. It could be volunteering in a women's shelter and bringing donations. Back to school activities are everywhere right now, collecting donations and collecting crayons and things that you can donate to your local school. those activities really make a difference. And I love to see them as part of your, your application.
I just want to add to what Dr. Yanaka said too, is like those soft skills, you cannot, you can't say how important those actually are, because you're going through, of course, if you made it through the interview process, then you've got the academics, you've got the, you've got the scores, you've got everything. Now we're beginning to look at things beyond that. And I know what our residency program did, is we would have during the interview season, every Friday, our noon conference, all the residents that were not post call, we sat down and one by one went through every single resident that they had interviewed that week from a resident perspective. And what they didn't want is, our program directors didn't want how smart did we think they were, anything, because they're like, we got that, we have their test scores. I want to know, how were they? Did they show up on time? Were they on their cell phone through the whole entire interview? Did you like them? That was a big thing, is you can be as smart as you want to be. You can have the greatest test scores, but if nobody likes you in the program because you have the absolute worst attitude, we are not going to take you, because we can't work with you and we're going to have a hard time with parents relating to you. And so a lot of those skills too was just like, how are they as a person? Could you hang out with them? Could you work with them? Would you want to be with this person on a call shift? And that was just as important as what they were capable of doing academically, because just like Dr. Yanaka said, we want to see you as a whole person, not just the scores that you can bring, not what else you can add to the program, but can we all get together as a family? Because remember, you're living with these people for like 3 years plus. So you have to like them, you have to be able to work with them, because they're also part of your family too. And so just remember that that part is also very important as well.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. I think what Dr. Naka said about well-rounded, I can remember having conversations with folks who said, well, I have my classes and then I did sort of like one thing. And I think, like maybe my academic struggled, but I was really a leader in this. And I will say that there are applicants who really hit it on all parameters. So I think you want to demonstrate where you have participated in things. When you have the opportunity to talk with your CV, that can sort of tell a story and weave through, like, what are the things that you spent your time doing? Why were those things important to you? I think demonstrated, I think that longitudinal thing is really important. When I see like somebody's done sort of a one-off thing, that's great. Now, if that one-off thing links up with a lot of other one-off things, and it lets me know there's been a real commitment to something there. If you've had research experiences, even if you haven't actually published, I think that's valuable to find a way to mention and to talk about. That's really great. And I agree that your personal statement, a lot of people like kids. I read some statements where people talk about how great kids are, but you could be a social worker and really like kids. You could be, again, a teacher and really like kids. You can be, a counselor. There's a lot of things you can do. Why do you want to be their doctor? Like, why is medicine the thing with children that makes a difference? And I think that's really helpful. I think some people think they have to know exactly what they want to do. I don't think you have to know that. I think it can be beneficial. Things that stand out to me are when people have really noticed what they want in a program or what they're looking for. So let's say that you're really going to be community focused. You can say that you're excited about a program that's going to do that. And I think it goes back to what Dr. Trevino said also about sort of telling your story and trying to paint a picture of who it is that you are as an applicant, so that, we get excited to want to meet you and talk to you. I think when it comes to the interview part, I think definitely practicing your questions, like why pediatrics, everyone's going to ask you that maybe multiple times in the day. I think making sure that you have questions for a program. Some can be general, but some maybe that are specific. It is always impressive when someone says, hey, at CHOP, I see that you all have this. Can you tell me more about that? All of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow, this person's really interested. And I'll say with the move to virtual, there can be a lot of thoughts that like everybody's just throwing applications everywhere. And so I think anything you can do to demonstrate that this program matters to you, I think is going to help you stand out in particular. If you have a particular leaning to a city or a place, right, there's opportunities to sort of share that. Or, I'm in Philadelphia, I'm not connected to Philly. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. But when I'm reaching out there, like, letting people know, hey, this place is special to me, that really makes a difference and it matters. But I think telling your story, really playing to your strengths and what are the things that make you unique? You are going to bring something really particular to a given program. I think it's helpful to know that programs are really looking at sort of a class of people. And so we need a mix of everything. Everybody can't want to do research all the time. Everybody can't want to do the same electives. And we're hoping to populate, our fellowship programs with strong residents who have a variety of interests. So I don't think that you have to paint yourself in a very particular way. You want to show who you are. And that will be enough, I think, for us in programs. And then I'll just add that if there is a blemish, I agree with sort of owning it and making it part of your story. So there's something that didn't go like you wanted it to go. You have the opportunity to control that narrative as opposed to somebody else sort of making assumptions about what may or may not have happened. And so I would suggest practicing that. I'm sure all of us are available to practice how you talk through that. Utilize if you have APDs or chief residents at your program. I'm sure Dr. Trevino would tell you he's glad to have the residencies training up come and like walk through what they would say in an interview. I think that's helpful. And then a really last thing, which should be small, but I'm reviewing fellowship applications right now. Please edit and review your application. Like people are looking for small reasons not to interview. And I had somebody in the grammar was like all over the place and the spelling was wrong and the years were off. And I'm like, this looks rushed through. This person didn't pay attention. Don't give somebody a small reason to like pass over your application.
May I just also say as well, one quick thing. So I'm looking at the chat and I just have to mention I'm not trying to overtake the conversation, but in the chat, a lot of questions were how to make yourself more known to your top programs. I would definitely say utilize your resources. Just because you may know someone that is not in the top program or you have access to someone that may not be in a program that you're interested in, we all talk. Remember, everybody that's on this call, all of the folks that are on these calls, we all sit in the same organization together, which is called the Association of Pediatric Program Directors. Trust me when I tell you, one of the interesting things is that for my residents, I just had 2 residents that are going through fellowship training or fellowship interviews right now. Well, I'm all the way in New Jersey, but they know that I trained in Ohio at Nationwide. So of course, I'm going to reach out to the individuals that I know at Nationwide, or I'm going to reach out to folks, Dr. Yanaka or Dr. Kazasaka and be like, hey, I got some folks that I'm interested in that or know you or whatever have you. Utilize your resources. You'll be surprised. With that also being said, you'll be surprised at how often we talk about people who may be red flags as well. So don't go someplace and act a fool and think that no one else is going to know at a different place. Remember, people talk and this community is very small. So it can definitely work in your favor. And just always remember that. Just always remember that, individuals, we really care, especially within the Black folks and the Latino folks that are in this community. We really do look out for you and we will go to great lengths for you. So just remember that. Keep us in your back pocket.
I wanted to address one of the questions on the chat about how do you let your program know that you're interested? There's so many ways and I love all the answers. I'm going to share my personal story that happened to me to illustrate. When I was in medical school, I was highly interested in the program and it was 4th year. So I did a sub-internship there. And the sub-internship, prior to going there to do my sub-internship, I was not selected to do an interview. And I was in the sub-internship for 4 weeks. And I kept asking, I'm here, I travel far away. Please, will you consider interviewing? No, you were not selected. I came back next week. Hi, will you consider at least interviewing me? Nope, you were not selected. So at the last week, I kind of said, you know what, I don't think it's going to work out, but I give it my best. I worked really hard in that sub-internship, really make a lot of connections with the residents. And it was the residents who went to the program director and said, I have worked with Joanna. She's high quality. I really would like you to interview her, meet her, and just get to know her. And they were so kind. The attending that I worked with during those 4 weeks and the residents wrote the letter of recommendations, additional letter of recommendations for me. I interviewed, and that was my dream residency. I finished going there. And so if have I not done this internship, I would have never been considered as part of the application. So for me, doing that internship, of course, you cannot go to 5 sub-Is. It costs money, it's hard, it's challenging. But if you have your heart set in like 1 or 2, that these are your top, you've done all the research, you know everything about it, and you're like, how do I tell them I really care about it? That is your step of doing this apprenticeship, really shows your commitment. You're there to learn from them and explore the program. And sometimes you may find out this is not a good fit. I thought it was really good, but now I learned that I don't think so. But for me, it was a successful story. So I wanted to advise the the folks on the call of how can that be a venue for engaging with a program of your choice.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, most places now, if you do a sub-I, they do tend to give you an automatic interview. Not everywhere, but a lot of places do, especially if you meet their, basic criteria, like they're going to interview you. It used to be that obviously they would try to interview when you're there doing a sub-I, but that's not always the case now in this circumstance that we currently live in. But a lot of places will do that, and that they'll offer you that interview out of courtesy, because in most places we like to take our necessary evil, right? Like, we know what you're going to give us no matter what, because you just showed it, right? So we know what you're capable of, and so a lot of times that will get you in the door before anything else, to be honest, because I want to take what I can touch and feel and know versus something that I can't. So I think about that in that setting as well.
I think that is definitely true. I also know that it is really hard to get those sub-I spots. So I don't want people to be discouraged if they're unable to get an away rotation spot at their dream institution. I would also say, if you're doing an away rotation, you have to be on your A game. Because just as good of an opportunity that away rotation can be for you to really showcase your skills, I've seen it work the other way, where people do not bring their A game, and someone who might have gotten an interview, we hear from the residents, they are not the one, and all bets are off, right? So if you are going to do an away rotation, make sure you are putting your very best foot forward.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I know for our program at CHOP, we try to pair those who come for our visiting clerkship with some of our URM residents to sort of make sure you're ready. But if the program doesn't offer that, most of these places have an LMSA or SNMA chapter nearby. Somebody in that chapter has gone through a sub-I or been a part of the institution. Like, use your resources and make sure you know what you need to know about a given place beforehand. I think all of us recognize there's going to be a learning curve, especially in that first week of either an inpatient or an elective or a consult rotation. But I think utilize your resources so you can be as prepared as possible to shine. We have, I think in the same way Dr. Yanaka said, we've had people that we, really wanted to interview, and it's been like, okay, maybe. And then people who honestly were a little bit flying under the radar, who we have heavily recruited because of their performance on a sub-I. So you want that to be the case for sure.
Another venue I don't want to forget, pediatricians. I don't know if you guys agree. Pediatricians love social media. And all the residency programs are in Twitter and Instagram, and you see the residents, sharing information. And I think that is a good platform. Careful, but I think, if you really want to know the truth about some of the programs and the challenges, follow them in social media. See what kind of opportunities they're posting, but also you can reach out to a lot of people that way. The pediatricians are posting a lot of information almost on a daily basis, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the ABA. So I think it's a great opportunity to follow a program or several programs that you're interested and see and learn from them.
Okay, so I see that we have a lot of questions in the chat. We do have one more question that we just want to make sure that the panelists are able to answer, and then we'll go to the chat and get some of those questions answered too, okay?
I'm sorry, Dr.
Yeah.
There's also a question that was raised by Jasmine here. Her hand has been up for a while.
Oh, sorry, I did not see you.
That's okay. Hi, my name is Jasmine. I go to University of Illinois at Chicago. Thank you all for being here and giving your very wise advice. I've come to understand along the way that a support network really matters, especially in residency. What advice could you give to someone who might want to explore residency program in a place that a support network, a family of friends doesn't already exist? Or should that be something that should give me pause? Should I weigh that heavily in deciding residency programs?
I'm happy to jump in here and share my personal experience. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and ventured to Ann Arbor, Michigan for med school. Didn't know anyone there. Ann Arbor was great, but it was way too cold for me. And I was like, I need to get out. I'm ready to go back closer to home. But really didn't have any geographic restrictions. So applied pretty broadly, including applying to Cincinnati. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't know where Cincinnati was on the map. I almost canceled my interview. But when I went to Cincinnati, I loved it. It gave me pause though. I think your question about not having a support system is a big one. I ended up going back to really convince myself that I couldn't see myself there. I didn't have any friends there. I didn't know anyone there, but I was very drawn to the program. And it was the best decision I ever made. I think you getting a sense of what the sense of community is like at the place where you will train is so important. I tell people all the time, I could have trained in a hospital that was next door to my parents. And if the community of people within that hospital was not good, it wouldn't have mattered how close I was to my family because I spent so much time at work, right? And so you have to really find a way to figure out if you are going to be supported at your residency program, what the people are like, the climate, the environment is everything. And, I think having social supports outside of the hospital is a really great thing. But I think it's okay for you to venture out and find that support within your soon-to-be residency family, and it's definitely possible.
And I was just going to interject really quickly, just kind of like Dr. Yanaka has just talked about before. And so again, I'm a Michigan person and then went to school in Ohio. Well, when I was looking at residency programs and I decided, the interesting thing is that nationwide at the time, I was the first Black male resident in like 15, 16 years. Throw in being a DO as well. So I was the first Black male DO they ever took. But I was also just so minority of minorities, right? And that gave me a pause to think about like, man, I don't have anybody here that I may feel like I can recognize with, talk to, or identify with, but very similar. I walked into the door and I was just like, oh my God, this is me, this is home. I just fell in love with everyone. Set the scene during that time period, and I was about 3.5 hours away from home. My mother, who had already had breast cancer, was a breast cancer survivor in my 3rd year, wound up developing her 2nd primary and B-cell lymphoma. And so I got the news right before I walked into taking my ITE for my 3rd year. And I was just like, yo, I know I'm on night float. I know everything that's going on, but I'm out because it's my mama. So I don't know what y'all gonna do, but I'm out. When I tell you all 42 people in my class rallied around me and took call to the point where I didn't, I was like, I'll pay back everybody. That was like, absolutely not. You will not pay back. You will not pay us back. Go be with your mom. And it was no questions asked. That to me was just complete and utter confirmation that I picked the right residency program. Not saying that everybody would do something like this, or that if you don't have a residency program, that's going to drop on a drop of the dime for you. It's not the right program for you. But I feel like going with your gut, even when you have reservations about not seeing individuals that look like you, because I had to remember they literally were going out their way to recruit me because they were like, we want people like you. We want you. So we want you to be here, and you're going to be the first of many, which I was. Well, not many, but of a good number. But you get what I'm trying to say with that.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, did college and med school in sort of the South, and then came up this way. And so I didn't know anyone here. I'd spent some time in the area the year before med school, but didn't know much about it. And I think for me, it was the same thing. I was looking for people who would be like family. So I often tell people, when I remember doing my second look weekend for medical school at Duke, and I remember hanging out with people and being like, oh yeah, I have family here. And I think when I was interviewing for residency and having follow-up conversations with people, it felt the same. But I do think that that really depends on individuals. I'll say when it came to fellowship for critical care, I was like, this time is about to be crazy, and I need to be in a place where I have people who can support me. And it's interesting, by the time residency was over and my chief year was over, you know, CHOP was that place for me. But that was different than my perspective in residency, a different season of life, different needs that I think I had at that time. And so I do think it's important for you to know, you know, residency is busy and stressful. Peds, you heard heavy inpatient, it is busy. There's a lot going on. And so for some people, it's helpful to be, you know, near. I will say that I had good friends in New York and DC. So while they weren't in my city, I had close college friends and old roommates that I could drive 2 hours or hop on the train to see. So I do think that making sure the people you're in residency with can be a support to you, because you're also going to go through things with them that are going to be hard to talk to other people about. And so you want people that you can really rely on. But I think, you know, some folks, you know, a lot of people have programs in the Northeast, their families in the Northeast, and they've been really intentional about that. So it depends a little bit on what you're looking for as well. I'll also say it was helpful for me to look at programs and ask the residents where they were from, to ensure that I was not going to a program where everybody lived down the street from their mama. Because I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to go home. And if everybody's always going home, like, unless I'm coming, you know, through for Sunday dinner, like, that's going to be rough, you know? So anyway, just other things to consider, like how many people had families, how many people didn't have families, et cetera.
Does anyone else have anything else they want to share? All righty. So one of our final questions is, how can applicants distinguish between programs that they are applying to? What are things that they should be paying attention to when selecting programs to apply to?
I'll go for this one. Some of this we kind of touched on just with that last question of the community and what that residency program looks like. What I did is I honestly made 2 separate lists. I kind of had my kind of hardcore objective criteria of what I wanted in a residency program, what experiences I wanted to have, and also being realistic of how far away do I want to be from my family. I'm an only child. I love my parents. I need to be within a certain radius for them. So, you know, that dictated how far I was willing to go. So I needed to either be within driving distance or about a 2-hour flight. So that made it very easy for me to start picking out which residency programs I wanted to have. But then I kind of had this separate list that was kind of like a soft criteria of, do I even want to live in this city? Who are going to be my friends? Do I even like these people? And on the few moments that I have off, is there something in that city that I can do? Because there has to be some sort of a balance. And my best friend, who is not medical at all, she went with me on every single rotate, like every single interview. I called her after every single interview so that because she knew me, so that she could tell me how excited I sounded about that program. I just debriefed every single thing. And she would be like, okay, that's cool. Because when it came time for me to do my rank list, you kind of, it's a while. You've interviewed for a long time, stuff starts blending together. You can't remember your initial thoughts. And so you start sometimes looking at your objective criteria, and you can kind of convince yourself that you like that program when in reality you really didn't like that program. And I would go through that list, and my friend would be like, don't you remember you sat in the car and said you absolutely hated everybody at that program? And I had to be like, oh my God, you were right. Because you need that part too. But I mean, I went in and I had plenty of programs that I was like, I love the attendings. I love what this program has to offer. I don't fit in with the residents. And as great as that program was, I was like, this is not me. So I can't rank this. And I think it's also knowing, when everybody talks about owning your story, knowing what you're trying to accomplish, knowing what kind of physician you're trying to be, knowing also how you learn. And so for me, I'm very laid back. I don't like to be pimped. I don't like to be put on the spot. I will panic and I will shut down, and it will look like I'm failing everything because I won't respond. And so I needed a program for me that was going to push me, but would be very kind of hand holding and comforting, because that's just the environment that I learned in. So that also helped when I would go to other residency programs, and I realized this environment is just not conducive to how I learn, but this one is. And so I think having those lists of those criteria that you absolutely need to have, but being honest with yourself as to who you are and what you need, and then also probably having another voice that's an outside voice that can also remind you of what's important to you too. I find like that is very helpful in making that decision.
I mean, I echo all of that. I often say the ACGME is in business for a reason, right? You're going to get great training no matter where you go, because accredited programs have to meet a standard, and so I think it ultimately comes down to the intangibles that matter most to you. Yes, are there differences between larger programs and smaller programs? Yeah, there are differences, but at the end of the day, what are the things that are most important to you, right? I think for folks who are interested in pursuing a subspecialty, you'll often, hear the argument that it's, nice to go to a program, that has the fellowship training program that you might be interested in. And, I think that that's a fair argument. But there are plenty of people who go to programs that don't necessarily have fellowship programs that match just fine, right? So I think you have to figure out where you're going to thrive. You're going to be a great general pediatrician regardless. I think taking the time to do some self-reflection to figure out what's important to you can really help you sift through programs and the various things that they have to offer. At the end of the day, it really did come down to a gut feeling. For me, I had a whole Excel sheet that I just didn't even look at by the end of it, because, I just went with where I felt like I was being led and where I felt like I was going to thrive and be comfortable, and where I could grow the most. And so I think that is my biggest piece of advice for all of you. Go with your gut.
And sometimes you're still going to have to go through and do that Excel sheet and the pro cons and the 5 columns, whatever your process is to get there. But I think the piece that you ultimately recognize is you're going to gain those experiences from your interviews. You're going to get that feeling. You're going to start seeing this is what really sets this place apart. And then when you come down to it, your gut feeling is really just different manifestation of the stuff that you kind of already knew from the objective side. And for me, I did a similar thing in terms of having that quick debrief with my wife, so that by the end of it, when she saw my rank list, she kind of had an idea of where things sat based on how excited I seemed to talk about different pieces. And sometimes it was about experiences that were there, and sometimes it was just about the place and the people. And the reality was, it was just having that kind of external person to say, yeah, that makes sense from what you've been telling me, even though it was still in line with what my gut feelings were and even some of the objective pieces.
I think if there's something in particular that you know you're passionate about, I think that is a fine thing to make sure there are resources in existence for a program. I think that makes a difference. So is the patient population reflective of what you serve? I remember there's a program that I was thinking about, and in looking at sort of where it was and then in talking to people, it was like, okay, this is not quite reflective of the type of place I want to be. I want to be in an urban environment because I know the patients that's going to bring. So those may be some differences. That being said, there's some places not in urban environments that are still serving very underserved populations. So I think knowing what are the things that you want to be a part of your experience is helpful. But I agree. I think finding people who sort of reflect you. I'll tell a story. I was interviewing at a program. I thought a big program. It was a big program. It was in a city, not particularly a state that I loved or thought I wanted to be at. But I remember meeting a Black woman in the program who was in my same sorority. And I was like, all right, here we go. Like, if she loves it, I'm going to love it. And it was amazing as I heard her talk about her experience and how things were. I was like, wow, this is not the program for me. And so I think just pay attention to those things that you experience and that you hear. And I think the like offstage moments, which I think they're a little bit harder virtually, but I think the social media things are helpful, looking at the experience of various individuals with that. I think times that you can have conversations with people in different spaces and opportunities. I can remember interviewing at a program and they really were great and made it a point to have me interview with a woman of color. It was a Black female attending. And when I asked her what her relationship was like with the residents of color, she couldn't answer it for me. And so I was like, all right, this is probably not as genuine as they want it to seem. And so I think, keeping your eyes open for different things like that is helpful. But
I'd like to add, go ahead. I'd like to add to use your network. I mean, you have gone to college and medical school, and there are residents that are from your medical school everywhere in the nation, no? So I really reach out to them and like, how is it like to be in your residency program, and had those honest conversations. And that's how I learned about some of the programs that were not the best for me and my learning expectations. College too. I mean, some of your college graduates are in medical school and have graduated and they're doing residencies. So tap into your graduate network because you're going to find a lot of honest information there that sometimes, you may not understand or know from that original interview. And if you have professors that in your current medical school that has done the residency in several areas, I mean, ask them to see if they can connect you. Ask them if they know of somebody currently there right now that can help you. And I think what Dr. Winters was saying, like, we want you to be successful, as we discussed, probably, and as already, 5% of physicians in the United States are African-American and 5% are Hispanic or Latino. And of those 2% are Hispanic women, Latina women. So there's not a lot of us, which means I am invested in your success. I want to double and triple those numbers by the time I retire. And I am not that young. So I'm in a hurry. I really want you to do well. So tap into your network of communities, of your medical school, of your college, of our team, and you will find somebody. The AAP has a medical student, a club or group. So tap into those resources so you can get to the bottom of the information you need to have peace about going or selecting those residency programs for you. And I do apologize, my children are starting school tomorrow and I have to put them to bed. So I'm going to have to step out, but thank you so much for the opportunity, and everybody, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Vellan. So that was the end of our questions, but we wanted to open it up to the group to see if anybody had any specific questions. A lot of the questions from the chat were answered on the chat, but if you guys want to unmute yourself and feel free to ask, please do. We want to keep this going as long as you guys need us to, or as long as my panelists can stay. Let me not say as long as you guys need us to, because that's a lie. As long as my panelists can stay. So please feel free to come off mute and ask away or type in the chat So you can definitely get your questions answered. And if my panelists feel there's anything we did not cover tonight, please feel free to speak on it. Because whatever knowledge and little nuggets we can provide this group, we definitely want to do that.
I was just going to say, I know that things are a little bit rocky right now in terms of being able to go away, especially while COVID, unfortunately, is starting to resurge, and you may or may not be able to go based off of your own home institution or the institution of the place where you were going to go for your sub-I. Some places have been offering virtual rotations, or being able to do certain, whether it's kind of like a retreat or an open house or something along those lines that are virtual. With that being said, don't let that make you fearful in this application process. Remember, you are not in a vacuum. You are not alone. All of us are going through this the same way that you feel very probably insecure, as well as kind of frustrated, worried, etc. The same way that we are as programs. I mean, we definitely want you to come see us. Remember, we're just as invested in you as you are in us. We need you as well. It's not just one-way street here. So we understand. And trust me when I tell you, programs, all of our programs have taken that into consideration when we're looking and reviewing applications. So please, please, please don't think that because you may not be able to do that away rotation if something happened with COVID or any of those type of things, it's still okay. And I'm happy, Jasmine, that you do have someone who is doing a virtual away rotation.
Someone did have their hand raised, but I don't know if they got their question answered in the comments that were stated. All right, so a question that came up is, what is an experience that you have had that confirms that this was a specialty for you?
So I'm going to share a story actually from this week. I'm on service in the ICU, and it relates to what Dr. Winter said about the challenges we face as pediatricians. And I experienced that a lot in the PICU, but I think it also speaks to the people that you get to work with. So I had an individual, a patient who had a really bad trauma with a severe traumatic brain injury, and unfortunately passed away pretty quickly after his arrival into our unit. And his parents, for their ability to sort of cope with things, were not at the hospital for very long, but they did want him to donate. And so there was some time of caring for an individual without family present, which I will say for us in our unit is very different. And I think for many pediatricians, I think especially as Dr. Winters mentioning, watching this mother lose a child was just very different. And so we sort of took some time in the middle of rounds and kind of debriefed with the whole team before my post-call resident left about what the experience was like. And for about 15, 20 minutes, it wasn't super long, our social worker, our bedside nurse, our clinical pharmacist, the residents I was working with, and the fellows just sort of opened up and shared things. And it was amazing to just kind of have a moment like that, where I think people were very open, and all of them were carrying this kid in their heart in different ways and carrying this family. And while they were processing their own emotions and perspective, they all were talking so much about the family. And it was clear that that was really the center of things. And so it was a difficult moment, but I think that the perspective shared confirmed that the folks who are in pediatrics, so my colleagues as physicians, but also the other people who end up being a part of your world when you practice pediatrics, are just on the same page. And so I could tell lots of stories, some that aren't as sad, but it's just a very fresh moment for me, and was one of those moments where I was like, yep, this was totally the right choice. I'm with the right people and I'm at the right place.
Yeah, I'll follow up. I mean, I I could not agree more. And I think the most impactful experiences that I've had have been with patients and families who are at end of life. And it's interesting, you know, I think as a resident, I saw things as very black and white. I think the ambiguity of medicine is really challenging as a trainee. And sometimes you see the ways in which your attendings interact with families and you feel like they're giving in. But as an attending, you learn that there's a long game. And, you know, that there's this one mom who, I remember the first time I was on service, she did not want to talk to me. Like she just was not having it. And I'd go back every afternoon. I would just kind of visit her and I would check in if she wanted to talk to me. She didn't want to talk to me. Her daughter had been in the hospital for months. But I just kept going back, and slowly but surely we developed this really great rapport. We had to have some really challenging conversations, but it ended up her daughter she had finally decided to withdraw care on her daughter, and I ran into her on a Friday evening, and she was just kind of sitting in the hallway in the main concourse of the hospital. And she had told me that she had decided that this time she was in the ICU. And she was like, "You all have become my family. And I just don't know what I'm going to do." Her husband several years before. And so, you know, it's those times are so hard, but I just am reminded of like what a privilege it is to do what we do and to walk families through the most trying times of their life. And I just don't take it for granted. So I think it's something that I reflect on quite a bit.
And coming from residency recently, I can tell you guys that sometimes these things are hard to appreciate when you're in the thick of it, because unlike any of our other panelists who have their careers in these specific areas and may develop those relationships with families, you as a resident, you may see people come in and out, and you may see them in different environments. You know, you may see a child who gets admitted to oncology, and then you see them when you're in your PICU rotation. But at the same time, you also may be the one who's there for that one event in the PICU when things don't go the way that, you know, anyone expects them to. And I still think, though, that even though you may not have personally developed those relationships, you can start to see some of those things of what that looks like in the environment around you. And it's really special, impressive. I don't really know what word to describe it, because you kind of see these things, and sometimes you end up seeing your fellows, faculty nurses in a different light, because your interactions with them were very much towards kind of content driven. This is what we're doing. And you see them interact in those times and recognize that there's a lot more oftentimes to people than you sometimes see in the little moments that we get as residents. And when you can kind of take that step back, I think it's a pretty cool thing.
I'd like to add, just to piggyback on what Dr. Trevino said, is don't also negate the impact that you have as a resident. Like Dr. Winters, I'm all outpatient community peds. No offense, Dr. Fowler, but I hated PICU. I prayed the most I've ever prayed in my whole entire life on my PICU rotation. Every single night, I was like, "God, this is me and you. Let's do this. Please don't let anybody die on me. I can't do this. My heart can't take it." But with that being said, I had a family who, unfortunately, their child had a very unfortunate prognosis, and the mother didn't quite understand. And so she had unrealistic expectations of what the course was going to be for her son. And it turned into a lot of meetings about the most humane thing, the most ethical thing would be for this family to withdraw care. And this family was not having it. And, you know, like I said, I am not an ICU doc, but I can talk. I can talk all day long. And so I spoke to this family. I was always in that room with that family. And what ended up happening was my PICU attending realized that they weren't getting anywhere because the family did not like them. So they sent me in because they said, you have the relationship with her. If she's going to listen to anybody, it's going to be you. And I'm like a second-year resident in the PICU. My PICU attendings are like, we stepping back, like you handle this because we see it. So I say that to say, you know, don't underestimate what happens, because there's certain skills that you may have. And just because you're a resident, it does not mean that you can't make a difference. Because honestly, I sat with that mom for 2 hours. The next day, the mom decided she was going to withdraw care after we had been sitting with meetings upon meetings upon meetings with this family. And so just remember, you're still just as an important part of that team as the attending is too. And when the attending knows that your heart is in there and that you're committed, you get opportunities like that to be a bigger part of the team than what you may not necessarily be afforded to in that role that you're in.
And I must say, just echoing off of what all of my colleagues have just said, one of the things that is just the best thing for me as being a pediatrician, and I think we can all attest to this, is the fact that somebody actually trusts me with their most precious gift on this world. Someone actually looks at me, Ty from Southfield Freeway in Grand River in Detroit, look at me as I'm their pediatrician, and they literally trust everything that I am telling them. It is the greatest and most humbled privilege I've ever had in my life. And it forces me every day to try to strive to be the best that I possibly can be. And it also reminds me when there are dark days, and trust me, there will be many a dark days in this journey, regardless if you're a resident or attending. And I say this because I think, and Didi, I think we both were in residency together around the same time. And reason why I hate the PICU is because H1N1, which was very similar to how COVID was at that time, I was in the PICU in January of 2010, I think it was, when we had, and Nationwide had a 50-bed PICU, by the way. We had to overtake some of the NICU, and there was only 2 oscillators left in the entire hospital. And we didn't have, we had people in the PACU and all other places, and it was just you and either the fellow or you and the attending. And let me tell you, they went to sleep or they were in the back room, and I'm sitting there just changing everybody's pip and peep and eye time and just going all over the place. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing no more. I'm just like, please just stop breathing 80 times a minute. I don't know what the hell you're doing. Pardon my language, but I'm just like, this is how real it was. But every time I always was like, whoa, people are really trusting me. They're trusting me as being their pediatrician. That was so uber cool that I was just like, okay, this is it. This is the pinnacle. So.
I think it sounds like we may be at the end of our questions. I want to thank each and every one of our panelists for joining us tonight and for bestowing your knowledge on this group. We really, really appreciate your guidance. And then to my co-host, Chineze, thank you for the work that you put in and the things that you did to make this happen. And to our participants, I hope that you were able to get something out of today that you can take with you as you go into this season. And we all look forward to seeing you, hearing from you, all of that good stuff. I hope that each and every one of you guys have a good rest of your week going into the weekend, and good luck with this applicant season.
Before you guys all leave, sorry, real quick, I just have a quick plug to put in. So I'm co-founder of an organization called Next Gen Pediatricians. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about it. Some of you are actually our mentees in the program. But if you're not, I strongly encourage you all to join the organization. It is a program that we founded actually last year, kind of when, you know, we were right in the beginning of the pandemic starting, with the recognizing that applicants were going to be on a different journey with the pandemic. And so we provide mentorship to fourth year medical students who identify as racially underrepresented in medicine. And we just basically provide mentorship resources, networking throughout the entire application cycle. And so if you are not part of the organization, please join. We hold sessions monthly just to kind of get you guys ready for the application cycle, talk about application things, you know, help figure out picking programs, and we actually provide mentors as well. So if you're not part of the organization already, please join. We want to help you. We got y'all is our motto, and that's what we're doing.
All right. Any other plugs anybody wants to do before we walk out the door? All right. Thank you guys all for joining. Really appreciate you. And come check us all out and feel free to email us if you guys need anything. All right. Have a great, wonderful rest of your evening. Bye, everybody.
You guys all take care.
Bye.
Good night.